the last apartment that I was living in, I had to pay 6 rents in advance. Like I had to pay half a year just in order to be able to stay.
And the landlord or the landlady doesn't want to rent the apartment because he or she is homophobic. He or she will never say that's the reason.
Portugal is one of the LGBT friendliest countries in the world and was rewarded a second place on the Gay Travel Index in 2021. With leading laws on gay and transgender rights, such as same-sex marriage and the inclusion of gender identity in the hate crime law, it seems almost too good to be true. So why do LGBT people live separately from the rest of the society in Lisbon? New neighborhoods like Bairro Alto and Príncipe Real, where mainly LGBT people live, are an example of segregation. Even gay realtors and gay hotels are popping up. Do gay and lesbian people not feel comfortable to live among everyone else? Is Lisbon really segregated? Somebody who knows firsthand how the segregation manifests itself in Lisbon is 39-year-old LGBT activist and actor Paulo Pascal.
If I knew at 8 years old, when I started thinking, oh my God, like, I don't act like the other boys, I feel different things than the other boys, I'm not interested in playing soccer, I want to play with dolls. And if at that time my parents would come to me and be like, it's okay, you're a non-binary person or a gender fluid person or you are a genderless person, my life would have been so much easier, right? Because I wouldn't have to fight with my identity and trying to understand who I was. So until we are all able to disprogram and come to this sort of neutral ground, and to start rebuilding history, it's always gonna be like this, you know. I'm still gonna be out there and have the need of identifying myself as a black queer immigrant, which in a lot of ways is a trap because I just want to be human. I think the whole world still has to work on accepting human as humans, and I think I don't know when it is gonna stop, but the good news is in like 2000 years where we were able to move out of the caverns into having in artificial technology and internet and stuff like that, so things are getting better.
I don't do much anymore, but I did a lot.
Miguel Valede Almeida is an anthropologist, teacher, researcher, writer, activist, and parliamentarian. We spoke with him about LGBT history in Lisbon.
This was a right-wing conservative Catholic dictatorship until 74, right? So, of course, any expression of sexual or gender deviance was repressed and was persecuted. So that's for sure. But then during the revolution in 74, 75, the country was focused on a lot of progressive issues, but not paying much attention to sexuality. So LGBT rights were not part of the revolutionary agenda. But then things started to improve in the late 80s and in the early 90s. That's when changes started to happen, very much because of the whole debate on abortion in Portugal, which was led by the feminist movement. And the LGBT movement that was starting at the time was an ally in that movement. But when abortion finally became legal, things changed a lot because there was space. From then on, there was space and acceptability for discussing sexual issues. And so the movement started. The 80s were also a very interesting period here because it was the moment when people were getting a little bit tired of all the revolutionary commotion. They wanted a normal life. So in Lisbon and Porto, there was a lot of what the Spaniards call movida, right? There was a lot of cultural a movement, a lot of nightclubs opening, a lot of, that's when the Bairro Alto phenomenon started, you know, with fashion and music and alternative lifestyles and everything. And that was very gay, of course, and lesbian. And so that also allowed for a lot of expression. So the 80s, the late 80s were very important for that. And it was very different from when I was young. I mean, in 74 on the revolution, I was 13. So, I mean, I didn't even know that I was gay at the time. And there was no cultural atmosphere that would let you even think about it as a possibility, right? So it was a very heteronormative world. And then it started to become something acceptable and visible.
When I was a corporate, in my previous professional life, I had, like many people, mostly from my generation, we had to hide part of our lives because we knew that in a professional context it could have been bad for our careers. So hiding is part of our way of living for many years. So doing a place, making a place where everyone feels comfortable for being what he or she is, was very important.
When we talk about communities, yes, I think there's sports communities, there's a lot of communities, and I know people that are in this like handball kind of clubs or many other types of clubs. But I think this experience, the way they feel, I'm not a part of any group in particular, you know, and on those areas like real estaters, I don't know how is that. I never used one to find me an apartment, for example, you know. But I know like when I tried to find an apartment before, because I don't have the papers or I don't have the decent documentation, sometimes the last apartment that I was living in, I had to pay 6 rents in advance. Like I had to pay half a year just in order to be able to stay. So I needed to have like thousands of euros up front to tell that person that, okay, this is half of a year I'm paying, so you allow me to stay in your house. But I could do it because I work a lot. A lot of people cannot do it. So what they do, they will have to be gentrified and have to live somewhere, and maybe sometimes even have to do awful things in order to be able to live.
In Bairro Alto, we find the Late Birds Hotel, a resort that is focused on a gay male public. Founded in 2015 by Carlos Sanchez Rivo. Why did he open a hotel just for gays?
It's always the same, and it's very interesting because when I opened this one, obviously the journalists came to me and say, "Oh, you're creating a ghetto." So it's always the idea, as soon as you do something a little more exclusive, which is not true, we cannot discriminate, so we accept everyone, obviously. It's just that we're focusing on a specific part of our community, the gay male one. But we know, and even if we live in Europe, and we're living in Portugal, in a very safe country, very open-minded, that we still need to have places where our community, our people can feel more comfortable, simply more comfortable. Now every hotel has to be gay-friendly because we cannot discriminate in hotels. We cannot say no to 2 girls or 2 boys asking for a double room with just 1 bed. But at that time it was not so obvious. So creating something that was gay, targeting this gay male community, it was to answer this demand actually to feel comfortable. It's a safe place not only for our guests but also for our employees. It's obvious that I don't ask my employees to say to me what is their sex orientation. It's not at all about this. It's just that in case they are LGBT, they feel safe to work here. So it's the added part from a project like this is to bring not only to the guests but also to the employees a safe place and also being more visible within the rest of the community. So it starts to be more like a friendly, even me with the guests. I mean, some of them I treat them like friends, even if they are my guests and they pay for staying here. This is the main point of the Late Birds. The Late Birds is not a place just to sleep or to have a breakfast or to lay by the pool. It's a place where you connect with others, you have experiences. We're bringing people from outside, straight people, gay people, LGBT people, I don't know, I'm not asking them. It's all about these connections in a probably easier way because it's a social place. I would say even a mission from the Late Birds is to connect people and make them feel that they have had a life experience, a short experience because it's only a few days, but strong enough to say, wow, we like this place. And if we're back to Lisbon, we will stay at the Late Birds because we're gonna have a different experience.
The reason the Late Birds exists is because LGBT people still need a safe place where they can be themselves. How is this issue expressed in daily life?
But of course, Lisbon is an interesting niche. It's a very special territory, and I think that people feel very much free here. If you go to smaller towns, it's probably not so easy. Although your typical phenomenon of aggression, of a community expelling people for being LGBT, of persecuting them, of shutting the door and so on, which you find in some other cultures and contexts, you don't really have a lot of that here. You may have it in a hidden way, but it's usually not very much expressed. You know, there's a huge amount of social shame and social control in Portuguese culture, and so people don't really act out a lot. Even if they are prejudiced, even if they are terribly homophobic, they will be afraid to say it. You also have to be careful and not be mistaken and think that prejudice is not out there. It is out there. It's just not expressed in a very strong way.
We have to understand that the gay experience is different for a white man or woman and for a black man or woman or for a trans man or woman, you know? And this is something that we don't realize right away because sometimes we feel like, oh, we're just part of this community and this community is supposed to comfort us and receive us and take care of us. And that's another shock that you have once you think you belong somewhere and then you go to that place being like, hey, I have this issue and I need some support or some guidance, and you find within the community that there's people within the community that is racist, that is misogynist, that is transphobic and so on, you know, human-phobic, you know, because they're just humans and because we're all victims of the system.
Imagine that a couple of gay men, and this happens, for instance, with racialized people. It happens a lot with Black people. But imagine that a couple of gay men tries to rent an apartment, okay? And the landlord or the landlady doesn't want to rent the apartment because he or she is homophobic. He or she will never say that's the reason. He'll say, oh, it's already been rented. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that, you know, I had promised this to someone, blah, blah, blah. So that's the sort of subtle mechanisms that you need to find out once you get socialized here.
First got here, I did face a lot of preconcept and discrimination at the times that I wanted to get a job, at the times that I wanted to rent an apartment, at the times that I wanted to do whatever I needed to do in order to be able to auto-sustain myself in Lisbon. Sure. So with that saying, obviously the system in here and the way the system operates is still constructed in a way that excludes people that are like me, you know, Black, queer, immigrants, will obligate the people that feel stuck in this circle to obviously do out of the system things that will sometimes be considered criminal, right? Because if you cannot rent an apartment in a city, you will go to a barrio. If you go to a barrio or to a hood, it might be a place that it's more dangerous. So you're already, you know, getting into a different set of mind and a different set of your existence. And then because if you cannot go to school, if you cannot go to university, if you cannot get a decent job and pay a decent rent, what happens to you, right? So this is the segregation. This is how the segregation happens. It's not like I don't feel segregated when I walk out the door and I'm on the
It's like
streets.
systematic.
You know, it's the way the system operates that will make you feel restrained and oppressed and incapable. It will make you feel incapable of accomplishing things. And it's not because you're not educated, or it's not because you're a bad person. It's just
It's because of the system.
the system doesn't allow you to. Then I have the other side, that is the side that as an artist I've always been able to work within the artist community. People always have worked with me towards being like, it doesn't matter if you don't have your papers, we're gonna, you know, still work with you because we're good, because we want you to do this with me. And sort of that has fed me some sort of hope and made the process easier. But it's still, when you think about it, it's still not a cool thing, because, you know, I shouldn't have to be asking for favors in order to to do what I love.
So when it's hard for LGBT people to find a house, why are LGBT expats still coming to Lisbon?
What you're talking about is something different, which is a more recent phenomenon of, especially when Lisbon became more trendy and a lot of foreigners coming in and people settling in Lisbon, expats of all sorts, many of them gay and lesbians, and they flock into those areas, okay? And they make them even more specific in that sense, even more obviously LGBT friendly. But the thing is that you don't really feel like you're going to be persecuted here, that there's going to be this sort of, because you know that you have the laws that are very progressive, but you also know that people won't bother you very much, even if they are homophobic. You don't really see expressions of homophobia coming up a lot. That has to do with cultural ways here. There isn't a lot of aggression going on. There isn't a feeling of social violence going on or going around. I mean, episodes happen, stuff happen, of course it does. But I think that people feel okay. But they also do the logical thing, which is to gather in the same areas or the same places and find connection with similar people.
Lisbon or Portugal has been in the last 4 or 5 years really sold us this beautiful place with the great weather, with the beautiful beaches. And it is that place. It is that place. You know, whatever I'm saying, I'm not saying it from a place of anger. I love this place. I think it's my place. I want to live here. I want to keep going here, living here. Do I wish my life was easier? Yes. You know, do I think I faced things that I shouldn't face as a human being? Yes. Do I feel like it's unfair and unjust for me for after 8 years not being able to travel because I don't have a document? Of course, yes.
A typical phenomenon of LGBT lives is migration. I mean, people always migrate from the countryside to the city, or they migrate from peripheral countries to central countries in order to find communities, you know. And I think that always happened in Lisbon. And nowadays, if you are on an upper social class, and if you come from abroad and you buy a home, of course, you participate in the process of gentrification, and it can actually have an LGBT connotation. And sometimes it does. And you can see that happening in Príncipe Real, especially. It's very upscale, gentrified, but also very LGBT. I think the big segregation in Lisbon, as you probably have noticed, and it's a recent phenomenon from the last 10 to 15 years, the biggest segregation in Lisbon is money. Okay, and that comes before sexual orientation, that comes before race and ethnicity, it becomes before migration, expats, nationals, and so on. That's what determines everything here. And so I don't think that there is a real problem with any sort of LGBT segregation or self-segregation. I don't think that's going on. As I was saying, if you look at all of these, and it's usually men, all of these French gay couples in Príncipe Real, buying apartments and buildings for loads of money, what they're basically doing is a very rich lifestyle, and it's not necessarily an LGBT lifestyle. They happen to be LGBT. But if you look at younger people, and people who come on for an adventure and for having a cultural experience, who go to Anjos or Arroios or Intendente and share a flat, and they share a flat in a building that has also immigrants and people from all origins, they are doing precisely what you're asking me what we should do. They are mixing, and then you start opening a little bar, a little restaurant, a little snack shop, a little supermarket, and this and that. You start creating an urban life, which is truly cosmopolitan, and that is based on a social contract, which is you accept people who are trans, you accept people who are lesbians and gays, you accept Black people, you accept Bangladeshis, you accept a digital nomad, and you accept, a rich person in a condo, and that's what I think should be implemented.
Segregation seems to be happening based on money and wealth, rather than on sexual orientation or gender. Nonetheless, LGBT people face hardship on a regular basis, one of them being opening up about their sexual orientation.
That coming out can be a hard thing. It's still, you still have people living 20, 30 years of their life and they only come out after. You still have people that get married, have kids, and then they come out. So coming out, just the act of coming out, of assuming your full identity or sexual orientation, or multiple sexual orientation, or multiple gender, it's something that it's still very hard nowadays. So we want to think that as a community, we're here to support each other. I don't know if in a practical way that works for everybody, because we know that within these communities, there are people that have more privilege than others, and there are people that are helped more easily than others. There are people that when they go ask for help, they're always going to be investigated or doubted.
This is still, this is a very peculiar society, because we have all of these egalitarian laws, we have all of these progressive laws. They are actually at the top, in international comparison. And yet you don't, for instance, see a lot of same-sex couples on the streets, for instance, or you see a lot of people that have problems coming out. And I think that has to do with the fact that Portuguese society is still very much family-based. It depends a lot on family support, on family emotional connections. I was saying, when you want to become autonomous and independent as a young person, you depend a lot on your family support for money and for everything. And also you depend on connections to get jobs. So the whole phenomenon of being afraid of the consequences of coming out is still big. So there's like an unbalance between legal progressiveness and cultural conservatism. And the problem here in Portugal was that we had those years of fantastic legislation and change in the legislation and the creation of equality in the law, but then we didn't do anything regarding education, training, advocacy. You see, we need a lot more of that. We need the state and companies and schools and universities to do a lot of training, a lot of diversity training. We need the state and the authorities to be vigilant about homophobia and transphobia. We need to have programs that incentivize companies and employers to say that they are welcoming LGBT people. We need a lot of proactive educational, pedagogical stuff so that more people come out, more people don't feel afraid of being thrown away out of their families, of losing economic support, and so on and so forth. And that's the type of thing that the Portuguese state and the community has not done. And that's something that needs to be done specifically for gender and sexual issues, together with those political economic aspects, because you'll only have a nice big city with lots of people feeling free from the sexual and gender point of view if they can afford to live in the city, that's for sure. But then you need policies that make it more welcoming for people still.
LGBT people want to live amongst everyone else, but still face discrimination. This creates a need for them to develop a safe space for them to be themselves. Lisbon is not strongly segregated, but discrimination has a more subtle form here. As of the 17th of May, Portugal is now on the 9th place on the Gay Travel Index.
I would say that my vision will be that the labels Lisbon targeting the gay male community should disappear one day, because everyone feels so safe everywhere that we don't have any more to do to create this. A link to the other part of the society, because the society will see us as not a threat, but existing very normally. We always talk about being normal. Being normal is just being yourself. For the moment, we feel that we still need this, but maybe within a couple of years, in society, in a more modern society, more open-minded society, we won't need this anymore. If I could say one day, the Lakebirds concept, the gay urban resort concept, is no more necessary, I will be happy.